Welcome to this webinar. Topic of today's webinar is the key updates of the update that will be done to Biochar seasons that will be valid from 15th of October. And I guess that you all have read the newsletter, but I'll repeat them. So Biochar is no longer needed to be tracked all the way to the endpoint if it has been blended into a C-sync matrix, authorized for diffuse C-syncs. And all matrices in the category biological matrix are authorized for diffuse C-syncs. On the right, you can see a screenshot that shows the part of the matrix positive list. And there you can see that there's a column that says diffuse syncs authorized. And if there's a tick, then that means this sync or this matrix is authorized for diffuse C-syncs and doesn't need to be tracked until the endpoint anymore. However, endpoint tracking remains possible at any time and is strongly recommended. I will now go into the updates for detail. Then we will have a look at the actual effects on the matrix positive list. And as I said, in the end, we will have plenty of time for questions. So for us as a standard body to issue a carbon sync, there are two essential conditions that must be met. Biochar must be incorporated into a matrix that prevents it from burning or being otherwise rapidly degraded, which would release the CO2 back into the atmosphere within a short time. And this risk of reversal must be minimal. The goal is to ensure long-term carbon storage. I created an easy example that will help to understand this. What does this mean? If we look at this metal chest over here, we can assume that this metal chest is our matrix at this time being. And we have amount of biochar that is placed into the metal chest and then locked, and it's safely stored. The other idea, or the other way, would be that it's just brought close by the metal chest, but it's not safely locked into the metal chest, which is a picture for our matrix here. So biochar is not protected towards being incinerated and burning. So this just shows us that it's really important that we really have a that the matrix, the biochar is really applied to a matrix and embedded in the matrix. Furthermore, the second point that is very necessary for us to issue a C-sync is the scientific accessibility of the matrix, which means that there must be sufficient knowledge about the matrix available to reliably model the degradation of the semi-permanent carbon fraction in biochar. Just as a small reminder, biochar consists out of a Pack fraction and a semi-persistent fraction, and the Pack fraction is stable over a very long time, and therefore is down here, now marked in green. And then we have the upper part, that's the semi-persistent fraction that has a mean or half-life time of 50 years and is degraded over time, for example, if applied to soil, as we see it here in this picture. And for these, we can issue C-syncs with shorter durability, so for example, 100 years, that correspond to the mean or that represent the integral or the mean amount of biochar that is, or of carbon that is present for this time. So the lower part is persistent and the upper part is degraded over time and can be used for temporary C-syncs. And these degradation needs to be modeled correctly, and that's depending on a matrix. And the second point is that the spatial distribution matters. When we have large amounts of biochar concentrated in a single location, risks increase. There's a higher risk of reversal as one single fire or some soil erosion could release substantial portion of a stored carbon C-sink back into the atmosphere. And the same is true for the modeling accuracy. For example, local soil conditions could differ from the assumptions that we used for the degradation curve models or for the persistence models, which could affect the reliability. And also, this is rare. It must be taken into account. Therefore, we can conclude that if biochar is applied in small, well-distributed amounts, as a rule of thumb, we could use 1 ton of CO2 equivalent per hectare per year, these risks become negligible since small deviations of the soil conditions, for example, average out. So this gives us the reason why it's important to look at the spatial distribution of biochar. Next step that we can do is look at an example. If we look at slurry, usually there is 0.5% biochar that is applied to the slurry, and we have an application rate of 40 cubic meters per hectare per year to the soil. So all in all, we will have 0.2 tons of biochar per hectare annually applied to a field, for example. So this corresponds to roughly 0.6 tons of CO2 equivalent, which is smaller than the threshold that we set of 1 ton of CO2 equivalent per hectare per year. And this is true for many more examples. And so we can conclude that for several matrices, diffusivity is inherent in the nature of the matrix. Regardless of the sales units, regardless of the size of the complete C-sink, it's very well distributed over a big range or big area, and therefore well spread, and no tracking is necessary to be considered as a diffuse C-sink. So this becomes, this can be pictures again by thinking about a biochar fertilizer that contains very small amount of biochar. So if it's applied to fields, then most likely the threshold of 1 ton of CO2 equivalent per hectare per year will be met. So as that is, as the diffusivity is an inherent part, inherent to the nature of many matrices, for these matrices, we don't require tracking anymore, but have tracking as a voluntary action, possibility. And it's not mandatory, but strongly encouraged. Because it gives you more information for your C-sink storytelling, and all of us know that C-sinks sell better if they have a good story. It also prepares you to laws and regulations that might come up or that are already up there. For example, in Switzerland, there is a rule that you can apply a maximum of 1 ton of biochar per hectare per year. And this you can prove by having it tracked to the fields. So it gives you increased legal certainty regarding local regulations or also marketplace requirements, and improves the traceability and long-term transparency. And so, however, although it's not mandatory, geo-tracking can still enhance the quality and the credibility of a C-sink and adds an extra layer of transparency. And we expect that it will also add on the value of a C-sink. and therefore we have some updates planned for the registry that are soon to be released. We want to display at a glance whether a C-sync has been tracked all the way to its final endpoint or only up to the product or matrix incorporation. And this will be a clear and visible quality marker. And also you'll update to include the option to update the geolocation of a C-sync. So what does this mean for different matrices? To answer this, I would like to open the matrix positive list to just show you again how powerful this document is. This is a table where you have the different origins of matrices in the first column. Then you have the definition of the different matrices in the following columns. And here, these columns give you a lot of information. For example, it shows you the diffuse C-sync authorization, and it also shows you what is the SPC fraction that will be accounted for. And for temporary C-syncs, for example, if you go down here to minimal matrices, you can see that, for example, for concrete, you can account for 100% of the contained carbon in the biochar, whereas for the C-sync 1000 plus, we account for 75% of the carbon content, which is what I explained at the beginning. Furthermore, this table gives you the conditions, when we accept, or what do we accept as a proof that biochar has been incorporated to such matrix, and it shows you what certification classes from the EBC or WBC are eligible to be used for this matrix. There is 7 different types of matrices. That's the biological matrix, the mineral matrices, materials, soil, landfill, wastewater, and geological storage. And at the bottom of this list, you will find some explanations that go in more depth than what you have here as the conditions to be accepted as the matrix. And that's what I'm going to present you right now. Our plans for the coming weeks are to gather some examples and make them visible in the matrix positive list as well. So you have some orientation in what kind of proofs are possible and accepted, and that will help you use your own creativity to find other proofs that might be as good as the ones that we will list as an example. So for biological matrices, as I already said, all of them are permitted for diffuse C-syncs, and it is required that your product has a clear application recommendation on the label. For example, as a fertilizer, how much you have to apply as a fertilizer or as a feed additive, and this will be sufficient as evidence for the diffuse application. So you don't need to track it after you applied it to the matrix. For intermediate products, it's solid manure, liquid manure, anaerobic digestate, or animal feed, which are clearly not the end use, and where the products also have different usages that might happen after the application to this matrix. You must provide documentation that the matrix will ultimately end up in a soil-based application. And there's a note that if the biochar is already embedded in a biological matrix, for example, fermentation residues, and is applied according to the dosage recommendation, it is considered as a diffuse C-sink, even in the case of later soil application. So you don't need to update your matrix to be soil or direct soil application, because the tracking to the sink, to the matrix is sufficient. So all in short, again, for biological matrices, tracking until the application and incorporation into the matrix is sufficient. For intermediate products that needs, you need to provide further documentation to confirm that the product will eventually end up in a soil application, but that's it. And you're always invited to do voluntary tracking till the end application, as I explained before. For mineral matrices, once the biochar has been incorporated into the matrix, the carbon sink can be registered as a diffuse carbon sink. And there's one point to take into account, that if the biochar is intended to be used under the construction C-sink standard, it must be tracked through to the building, because that's a requirement of the construction C-sink standard. For materials, tracking up to the point of application is sufficient. For wastewater, it's also the tracking up to the point of application, so the wastewater treatment plant, and additional documentation that the matrix will ultimately end up in a soil-based application. For example, you can prove this by a disposal contract. So this is equivalent to this intermediate products that we had here for biological matrices. And for the remaining matrices, so that would be direct soil application, landfilling, and geological storage, it's the geolocation of the endpoint is necessary, but there is an exemption, that is unprocessed biochar, which can also be recognized as incorporated into a matrix if the first C-sink owner provides annual proof that there is no risk of alternative use other than soil application. This means there is no economic incentive to apply the biochar differently, since the price is significantly higher than the market price for charcoal or other fuels. For this, a detailed knowledge of the group of recipients and their field of activity is required. And you can combine a delivery note with the documentation that serves as a proof for the incorporation into the matrix, and thus into the soil. Well, that's it from my end. Thank you for your attention. And now I'm happy to hear and answer your questions.
Okay, Noemi, please.
Yes, thank you. So I have a question regarding the greenhouse gases emission accounting in the end. So when we mix the biochar into the matrix, I understand that if this mixing has some emissions, we have to count them and put it in the emission backpack of the carbon credits. What happens with the emissions of if we transport the products with the biochar to the end user? Do we have to account for these emissions? If we don't track the biochar until the end application, we may not know the emissions associated to this biochar for the transportation. So
yeah,
what do we do?
The same rules as we have them right now for diffuse C-sinks apply. So as you said, the mixing emissions are taken into account, and for the transport emissions, we have a factor, or it's already part of the security margins. And as that's true for biochar, that is part of a product, then we are not speaking about pure biochar transport anymore. So that will be part of the transport of this product anyway, so part of the baseline. so you don't need to track additional emissions there.
Okay, thank you.
Susanna Bondeson, please.
Yes, it went a little bit fast here, so I have a question, just control. If we have the biochar delivered to our site and then we mix it into compost, so that's a matrix of green compost, and that's a diffuse C-sink then. It can be regarded as a diffuse C-sink, if I understand you right.
Yes.
Yeah.
You need to take into
Mhm.
account the emissions for mixing, and if it's not you doing the incorporation to a compost, but a different processor, then they have to register as a processor or be registered by you as a processing partner. But yes, as soon
are
as the biochar is applied to the compost, you can stop the tracking, and all further tracking is voluntary.
Maria, you also had a question.
Thank you for the presentation. I had two questions actually. One, could you speak a bit about what are the recommended mixing ratios of biochar to, say, compost? And would this change the diffuse C-sink rules?
So it doesn't impact the consideration as a diffuse C-sink or not. So you, as soon as it's mixed to compost, you can consider it a diffuse C-sink. And regarding the mixing ratios, that depends very much on your soil and your local conditions. And I can't give general recommendations there.
Okay, I understand. And then another point was you mentioned we would have to like prove geolocation for direct soil application. Does this mean just like every year we would tell you where the biochar is placed, or would this be for every bag of biochar, or every bag of a mixed biochar that we then have like a geolocation tag to it?
If you already mixed it to the compost, then it counts as a diffuse C-sink, and you will, or the place of mixing will be the final required GPS location. If you're speaking about pure biochar that is applied to the soil, then you need to have the location of each and every bag that you applied somewhere.
Okay.
So pure biochar needs to be tracked to the end. The only exemption is that the one that I presented, that you can also show on a yearly basis that you sell it at such high price that there is no risk that biochar doesn't end up in a soil.
Okay, and so for, say, a mix of biochar and agricultural soil, geolocation and tracking is still very much needed.
What do you mean? If you mix pure biochar in agricultural soil, then yes, it's very much needed.
Okay, yeah, I understand. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, Bengt Siren,
yes,
please.
thank you. Yeah. What proof do you need for when you sell pure biochar? What proof do you need so that the price is too high for something else? Use it for something else.
So if you sell biochar as a pure product, then the requirements are really high. So the label needs to be very detailed, and you have to have conduct a market study where you compare it with the market price for charcoal. And as I said before, you need to know your customers. So if you sell it to, let's say, steel producers, we won't believe you that they will use it in agriculture. So the market study requires the price, your customers, prove that these are your customers with their field of activity, and the delivery notes. And then this can be accepted.
Yep, we sell pure biochar for green or for the city plants, and we sell mix soil a mix with compost and biochar. So we sell both products to the same customer mostly. And the mix will be diffuse, but the biochar, yeah.
Yeah. So if
you need the company, and you need an documentation from us. I say this is for soil use. It will not be used something else. That's enough.
If you use it, I understand that you use it in urban soil. So
yes,
you use
yes.
it. Yes. So then it would need to be the and then you probably sell it to a specific construction site. So this GPS coordinates would be perfect, because then it's applied to urban soils, and that is matrix SO2.
Yeah. Yeah. So then we can put the GPS location. Yeah.
Yeah, of the construction site. So this is tracking till the end, because it's the pure biochar that you use there.
Thank you.
Benedict, please, next.
Thank you. So first of all, I would like to thank you for updating the ruling. It's really helpful and much easier to understand. One thing that still causes some kind of confusion might be that in the permissible matrix list, there are some. Well, it's not always clear what is meant with a certain application. Is there additional information what is meant and what is not meant, especially when looking at one application? For example, I know that there was some confusion about the potting soil category. So that you can get some additional information of what is the application like here? What shouldn't it be confused with, something like that?
For the potting soil, we introduced the second potting soil matrix, where we clearly differentiate between the substrate for horticulture and the substrates for ornamental plants urban use. So the B09 shall be used for agricultural usages. So everything that comes into the product in contact with food or feed production. So also if you apply it, for example, to grassland where you have your cows eating the grass, then you'd still need the B09. So in this specific case, we divided it, and otherwise, if there is uncertainties, you are always invited to ask where you should put it. It's very difficult to, or it's not possible to have a complete explanation that includes everything. So therefore, this will be a task. So the more detailed explanations that you ask for are an endless task, and therefore we don't do it. Instead, if there's uncertainties, please come to us and ask.
Susanna, again, please.
We have carbon C-sinks on the Carbon Future platform laying there right now. I have only accepted them as incoming, but we haven't yet packed them, and we haven't done all that procedure that we had to do before. So they are just laying there, delivered during the summer. But the new rules, are they applicable for those C-sinks that we have there? We haven't yet asked for a certification for them.
Yeah. If you ask for verification for them after the 15th of October, they are applicable. If you ask before 15th of October, they are not applicable.
Okay, then we will wait until 5th of October. And then I want to also have another question to be counting up to that Bengt asked before, just to be sure. Let's say we deliver to a construction company. They are active in planting in urban cities, and we deliver pure biochar to them. And we know the place where it will be applied, the project. Do we need that procedure? Because that's not a diffuse C-sink then, because we deliver the pure biochar. Do we need to have this signed document still, or is it just good enough that we can give the delivery note something, or show that we sell it to a high price, so it's no one will use it to burn it, or what proof do we need to give?
Sorry. If it's applied to urban soil, then you
Yeah,
track
no,
it.
it's not. Yeah, okay. The customer of us, that customer will use the biochar, and they will mix it into some matrix later on in the soil or in compost or so. So, but they want to do the mixing themselves instead of we are doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
So if they do the mixing, they would be a processing partner of yours, and
But they don't want to take the whole this procedure to be a processing certified processor, for sure not. They maybe do this once or twice a year, so that's not their core business.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So your question can be whether application of what counts as urban soils. Because often if you use the Stockholm model, then you don't mix it with soil, but rather with mineralic, with material, with stones, with thingies that then go down the ground. And this mixing would be allowed as well, but it still requires the tracking until this mixing happens, and the confirmation of this company that they mixed it with the minerals that only go into the urban usage. So,
okay, so it's not the end user. It's good enough with our customer that are
exactly, and this is that they confirm that they mixed it with something, and that's why urban soils also have this tag diffuse C-sink applicable, because this is referring to this mixing with the material that then will be applied to the urban soils, and is treated equally than mixing to compost or to other things. That means that you have to get the confirmation of this company that they mixed it into the with the minerals and the stones that then are the substrate or the material that goes down into your urban environment.
Okay.
Okay, then I would like to thank you all for the participation. The key take-home messages are that tracking until the endpoint is not anymore required for diffuse C-sinks, and that endpoint tracking remains possible and is strongly recommended from our end, but becomes voluntary. And I hope this webinar was informative for you. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out to service@carbonstandards.com. And I'm looking forward to all the C-sinks that we can issue for your projects. Have a nice afternoon.